Ms. Mary Lawson Brown, Rufus Borum, Justin Campbell, and Tammy McCaskill. You're hereby notified that a workshop meeting of the City Commission is called to be held at the regular meeting place of the City Commission at City Hall, 201 North 2nd Street in the city of Palatka, to begin at 4 p.m. on Thursday, March 8, 2018. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss River Street traffic calming alternatives. We will now go ahead and call this meeting to order. Will everyone please stand with me as we have our invocation and our pledge. I'm going to ask Commissioner McCaskill if she would lead us in invocation and pledge.
Okay. Bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to join together tonight in this building. Father, we ask that you guide our hearts and our minds to help us to make decisions that are in the best interest of the citizens. We ask this simple blessing in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown. Commissioner Borum.
Present.
Commissioner Campbell.
Present.
Commissioner McCaskill.
here.
All members are present and accounted for, and you have a quorum.
Thank you. We're actually going to move public comment to the back of our agenda so that we can actually hear the presentation. The presentation will be given by Mr. Jonathan Griffith as a part of the workshop. From there, we will enter into a discussion, a commission discussion. And I guess one of the things we want to talk about beforehand, just to kind of let you know as Mr. Griffith comes forward, looking at River Street traffic has been something that has been discussed for probably in perpetuity for a number of years, well before we sat on this dais. But conversation has changed over the years. River Street, which was once a state evacuation route, that designation has changed over time. But the conversations continue on as to whether there needs to be more enforcement of traffic, whether there needs to be speed bumps, what mechanisms can we put in place to make it more convenient or safe for the residents on the roadway. We all know historically that River Street has been a back road transit route for many people who live outside of the city limit, as well as those who are trying to circumvent other veins of traffic in order to come through into the community, particularly those on the western end of both the city as well as some of the county portions, i.e. Silver Lake and other areas. But it was interesting. I had an interesting conversation with Mr. Griffith earlier today, and we were talking about some of the aesthetic improvements that could be put in place for River Street. And so, like many people in this room, we brainstorm, and then we think about how much it costs later. And so we were talking about different mechanisms that could be used. And we started talking about brick crosswalks, for example, and you'll hear about different alternatives throughout, which make more sense. But in my rambling, and Mr. Griffith kind of guiding me through that process, we talked about brick crosswalks, for example, as an aesthetic appeal and also as an opportunity to kind of slow down traffic. We also talked about flashing lights and other traffic calming devices to indicate opportunities at different intersections to cross, which psychologically may create different ways for people to come onto those roadways. And all those ideas were things that were approached throughout the process of his report. Now, we can go through and do a very long presentation of everything that came from the traffic calming study. And I think at the end of the day, we leave out of here with no more understanding than what we get from a summary. I think the summary of alternatives that are presented would in essence give us the valuable information that came from the study in order for us to move forward. From there, we would enter into dialogue, i.e. public comment, which allows citizens to voice their concerns. The one thing I suggest that we do throughout the entire process is that we continue to handle each other with respect and dignity that we have been doing thus far as it relates to this issue. We understand that issues that are close to you, particularly close to your home, which bring about safety concerns and things of that nature, create the additional excitement and frustration that goes along with the process. But we're all going to handle ourselves accordingly throughout this process. The other thing is we want to make sure that your ideas are heard and that your frustration doesn't overbear what your ideas are. And so we want to continue to give everyone a chance to speak. At this point, depending on how many folks raise their hand on this next question will determine if we in fact go to speaker cards as the methodology. I always like to try to be informal in the way that we deal with workshop, because I think everyone needs an opportunity to speak. And so how many people here have filled out speaker cards or want to speak on today's issue? Okay, so we've only got a handful. What I'm going to do, we'll go ahead, for sake of it, it's time to have your comments. We'll just have you come up front. If you can, for Ms. Jurgis's purposes, just drop your speaker card off to her prior to the end of the meeting. But just make sure when you come up that you give her your name and your address for the record. But we want to make sure that we have dialogue and that the dialogue is healthy and we move forward. And so without further delay, I'll go ahead and let Mr. Griffith kind of present to you the overview of where we've been as far as studying traffic and some of the other things that are there. I also have the Palatka Police Department present as well to maybe give an overview of enforcement measures that have been put in place, and then we will proceed from there.
Thank you, sir. I think most of the people in this room are aware that we've been a part of this process for a little over a year and a half, 2 years now. CRA, with support for the South Neighborhood Association, set aside the funding for this engineering study and traffic calming report. The city obtained the services of Peters and Yaffe through Ayers and Associates, who's on continuing services with the city to provide engineering support. And they came back with a fairly detailed report on appropriate and inappropriate traffic calming measures, as well as a summary and conclusion on the predominant use of the roadway. They gave us some parameters on how to consider these alternatives. Those include, the impact to other collector streets throughout the city based upon any implications of the result of this report and what the city actually puts in place. I'm fairly happy with the report and the fact that it gave us 7 alternatives ranging from $15,000 up to $650,000. And the level of detail, Commissioner and City Manager, is almost to the point where we go into final engineering. So you can, with some reassurance, know that if you're going to move forward with any one of these options, some of them being intermediate, some of them being more concrete and permanent, you can move into engineering and installation fairly quickly. Just to kind of elaborate on that comment I just made, some of these are what we would term as intermediate. There are things that can be done that really don't impact the road from a transportation volume perspective. All they do is calm the traffic. They don't impact emergency response times. And those things are what we call RPMs, or reflective pavement markers, signage, striping, those things that make the road appear a little bit narrower and give the driver some warning or some guidance. It changes their behavior in simpler terms. If you can imagine, when you're walking through a narrow hallway, you go a lot slower than you're walking through a hallway that's 8 or 10 feet wide. So just to summarize before I get into the 7 alternatives, some of the appropriate measures that the engineer recommended would be vertical treatments, including speed humps, not speed bumps, speed tables, raised and or surface treatment crosswalks, striping, signage, radar signage, and local road designation. And we can get into that in more detail later if you so choose. One of the other alternatives, which is more costly, is what we call at-grade enhancements. Those were the brick crossings that the mayor was referring to. And we've done a lot of those recently around the riverfront area, and they've been very effective, but again, they are more costly. Some of the inappropriate measures are one-way and multi-way stop conditions, stop signs, speed bumps, novelty signs, like children at play, 23 mile per hour, 27 mile per hour, things of that nature, and installing traffic calming features on streets that are specifically intended to be collector roadways. So one of the alternatives was just an intermediate measure. It was putting up reflective pavement markers on the curves, curve warning signs ahead, additional striping, narrowing the road travel lane down to 10 feet with striping and expanding the bike lane out to 5 feet. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had alternatives that cost $650,000, which would be doing raised brick intersections, median plantings or concrete gores, and roundabouts. And those are the types of things that I think it's good to know for context, but I think we all know that we're not in a position to finance an improvement of that scale at this time. And it also has implications on what may come of the Cypress Mills development site. I think it's important that we don't take any quick action that can negatively impact the development of that site, especially when we have invested a lot of time and effort in facilitating the planning for that site. Are there any questions?
Implementing something quickly, like something maybe that's not permanent, would probably still be accommodating to what's coming forth, maybe with the mill, with Cypress Mill.
He said it one more time, I'm sorry.
Sir,
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
I think, like putting something in, like considering putting something in like that's not permanent, a permanent installation, you got temporary installation, and I think that was one of the options that didn't cost very much or whatever, so we can expand or move it as needed versus putting it in permanent. I think if we maybe consider something along those lines, I think that'll be.
Yes, sir, and maybe it's better for me to conclude by just stating what specifically the SHNA has requested and what Public Works' perspective of that is. Would you like me to go into that, Mayor?
Can you go into the 7 options or the breakdown of what the costs are for the options that were presented, so that everybody will kind of have an idea from a cost perspective, and then from there talk about, and then we can enumerate what the SHNA had in place.
Okay. So there were 7 options, and what the engineer recommended as an immediate intermediate option. The immediate intermediate option was provide a 5-foot bike lane and delineate with a 6-inch stripe, provide a 6-inch solid white double yellow center line with bidirectional RPMs, reflective pavement markers, install curve warning sign with 20 mile per hour at the curves at either end of River Street, install bicycle lane ahead signs at either end, and install bicycle lane sign end at the northern end of River Street. Some other suggestions were to move the 25 mile per hour speed limit for visibility reasons, and then also consider the installation of what they call a 25 mile per hour speed limit sign with radar capability. The total cost for that was estimated at just under $16,000. Alternative number 1 was to take the intersections of River Street, Morris, Dodge, Kirkland, and Hotel and raise these, causing the vehicles to slow down at the intersection. They'll be paved with brick pavers, similar to those that exist on Hotel Street, just north of River Street. Install chicanes between Morris Street and Dodge Street, and between Dodge Street and Kirkland on River. And the chicanes should be spaced 300 to 400 feet apart to discourage excessive acceleration between the chicanes. Additional striping.
What does that do?
How much
to-
that? How much that?
The cost estimate for that was averaged at $673,000.
What does that do to your rescue people going through it if you raise it?
That's part of the reason for the spacing, Ms. Brown. If you do chicanes any closer together, and it's going to be hard for emergency response vehicles to maintain a speed to give adequate response time.
But if you leave that space in there for emergency vehicles, cars can go through those spots too, so.
Yes, alternative number 3 was a recommendation to reduce the width of River Street from 30 feet to 20 feet. The existing curb and gutter along the south side of River Street between Moore Street and Hotel Street would be removed and a new curb and gutter installed, providing for 10-foot travel lanes in each direction, and then a multi-use path to be constructed on the south side of River Street, the river side of the road. This was estimated at $425,000. Alternative number 4 recommends the restriping of River Street consist of a 10-foot travel lane and 5-foot bike lane, and install many raised traffic circles at River and Morris, River and Dodge, River and Kirkland, and River and Hotel Street. The raised circle islands should be constructed with 15 to 20 foot diameters and additional striping and signage. This was estimated at $110,000. Alternative number 5 recommends reducing the width of the travel lanes on River Street and increasing the width of bicycle lanes by means of pavement markings. River Street would be restriped, comprised of 2 10-foot travel lanes and 2 5-foot bicycle lanes. This striping exercise is estimated at $25,000. The SHNA's request was to install a 4-way stop at 3rd and Laurel to mitigate drivers entering River Street accelerating. These are the words that came from their resolution that they approved at their last meeting that myself and Chief Shaw attended. They would also request delineator posts. These are not what we refer to as RPMs. These are the posts that we refer to as breakaway posts that go in the center of a travel lane along the curb in front of the boat launch parking lot, and to install 4 speed cushions along River Street.
What's a speed cushion?
Speed cushion, Ms. Brown, is something that its width is approximately 4 to 6 feet in width. So a speed bump is this tall and this wide. Speed cushion is this wide and this tall.
Yeah, I had a meeting with Mr. Russo, and prior to that, I had several other meetings with the South Historic District, whatever. But long story short, these seem to be fairly, I guess, amenable options here, which just shouldn't take a whole lot to do. And he said if you don't do 4, you can probably do maybe 2 or something like that. Put them in different places or what have you. So to provide the safety and kind of also help with the cost piece of it.
Where does the determination for 4 come from?
Well, no, there was the talk about maybe putting it in, but in terms of if you don't do 4, you can do maybe 2 or whatever, just to kind of help put something in place to slow the traffic down with the speed humps, and also maybe some of the bump stop things, or whatever, whenever you're approaching an area where you need to either slow down or stop, you have that little reminder thing where you say, okay, you're about to come to a stop or an area where you might need to pay attention to work, your path.
Mayor, the report actually suggests if we were to entertain a speed hump improvement example, to install them on the river, traveling north to south just prior to Kirkland Street and just after Dodge Street. They did also have an observation that the installation of speed humps and stop signs sometimes do encourage what we would consider acceleration between stops. So from Public Works perspective, it's more so getting the 80th percentile traveling at 30 miles per hour rather than 35 miles per hour. We don't believe putting stops or measures that are going to require people to slow down and accelerate as a solution.
Have you all looked at what was done on Washington Street with stop signs every couple of blocks?
Have you looked at what happened on Washington?
People peeling off.
And they don't.
Well, I mean, they did it one time over on River Street, because this is about the third or fourth time we've discussed that, the speed on River Street.
Does the report speak to stop signs?
It does.
Four-way sign.
And just as I stated, they don't recommend stop signs for the purpose of it. It actually results in a deceleration and acceleration, which will actually make it worse for people that live on River Street and residents of the neighborhood. It's additional noise. The idea and the intent of this study was to put forward solutions that would slow traffic, not stop traffic.
Right.
Okay. Before we come up, Palatka Police Department, if you can, chief or either captains that are present, do you guys want to kind of give an overview of what you've done from an enforcement standpoint?
Yes, sir. Apologize for my tardiness, but I just got back in town.
We didn't notice.
In the last hour. Over the years, we've done enforcement throughout different times, periods where we've had complaints of speed in the area. The issues addressed, it usually goes away, but when we go away, the issue returns again. So that's happened over a period of time. We do agree that a traffic calming device might assist, but we also understand that the financial aspect on the side of the city and the historical district and the recommendations or the type of device that may be put in the neighborhood is something that has to be taken under consideration with the neighbors. As it pertains to future enforcement, we do understand that this issue is going to continue on if nothing else is put in place. We'll continue to address it in a on and off method as the complaints come in. We'll address it with enforcement. We flooded enforcement in the area as of late as much, and we are seeing some calming. But again, we do understand that when we're called or we're pulled away to a different area, that it's going to continue or it's going to increase again.
All right. Any questions of Chief? All right. Let's any questions from the commission? Let's start off with a little dialogue. Mr. Russo.
Yes, sir.
You want to give us some comments from South Historic perspective? Maybe give us some historical perspective of your recommendations, where they come from,
Yes, sir.
and the foundations of each recommendation.
Vito Russo, 415 Emmett Street. I'm current president of the South Historical Neighborhood Association. And so this is an ongoing issue, as you mentioned earlier in the meeting. And so there's a number of things that we'd like to see done to address the issue. Our motion, what the Neighborhood Association officially requested is a four-way stop at 3rd and Laurel Streets in order to mitigate the acceleration into the chicane on the north end of River Street, and then raise pavement markers along the center. A raised pavement marker is similar to this, what we see all the time. So that will help make a driver aware that he or she has crossed the line. That would, I think, go a long way to prevent any accidents at Mr. Griffin's home. And the third thing was these speed cushions.
Just for Mr. Griffin's home, we're talking about right on the curb. On the
Yeah,
curb.
Mr. Bob Griffin, right?
Just so everybody has a reference point. On the curb by the city dock.
Yes, unfortunately, his house has encountered a number of vehicles hitting his house or property. So those are the three things that we've officially requested. The number of speed cushions, as Rufus has mentioned, doesn't have to be 4. Whatever the city deems necessary is going to be okay with us. If we can get away with 2, that would be good. But that might get into what Jonathan mentioned about avoiding a slowdown and an acceleration condition on that street. But 2 would obviously be more fiscally affordable than 4. So, those are the three items that we officially requested. Mr. Griffin is going to ask for one or two others. We think some of these that are inexpensive and that are the sole responsibility of the city and not involving the county can be implemented relatively quickly. So we would really like to see something that the city could act upon in a short time frame be done so. Because as you mentioned earlier, this is an ongoing issue, it's been going on for years, and it's really, what we're really trying to do is prevent a tragedy, because somebody's going to get killed out there with some of these people driving 60 plus miles an hour on this 25 mile an hour zone. So aside from those three recommendations that the South Historic Neighborhood Association has made, what we would like to see is the city reclassifying the road as being city-owned, and rather than having the county as a stakeholder. So that would eliminate some of the bureaucracy of these solutions.
Come to the joint task force meeting so you can be an advocate for it. Or the joint commission meeting. We're actually revisiting interlocals to see what's going on from that standpoint as it relates to streets.
We would also like to see the street being reclassified as a local street rather than a collector road. That also might simplify the bureaucracy involved. The speed cushions that we've promoted is really a speed table is what it is. It's about 14 feet long, but it's in 3 sections. And this will address the EMS vehicle issue, because it's in 3 pieces. So you've got a center piece and then 2 outside pieces. There's a gap in between them. The gap accommodates the wider stance of EMS vehicles rather than a passenger vehicle or a passenger truck. So the EMS vehicles would not encounter the speed table and these speed cushions, whereas a passenger vehicle, passenger truck would. So that's why we're pushing that idea. So I'd just like to make a couple of points here that the speed cushions are rated at 25, 30 miles an hour. That's the current speed limit there, so we're not asking for any kind of reduction. That's just basically, as Jonathan mentioned, it's not getting them to stop. We just want them to slow down. So that's the one point I want to make. And these speed cushions do bolt down. So this is not a permanent structure. So if we deem it's not effective, or we want to reconfigure the spacing, it can be done so relatively simply. Pavement markers are very inexpensive, and I think are very effective. We just basically want to emphasize the fact that it's a public safety issue. That's why we're here. It's a public safety issue, because you've got bicyclists, you've got people walking their dogs, you've got the boat launch parking lot area that's got the playground adjacent to it. There's going to be kids walking all over that place. So if we can get control of this issue, that's going to be beneficial to not just the neighborhood, but the city as a whole.
Any questions for Mr. Russo? Commissioner?
No.
Heard you.
No,
I
I
was
said-
thinking out loud.
No, I said no question.
No questions. Are you sure,
So-
Rufus?
Well, we've talked and.
Yes, we have.
Question, the texture, so your South Historic is amenable to texture crosswalks, i.e. something like brick crosswalks or things of that nature?
Sure, it's very aesthetic.
Okay.
Absolutely. We actually would like to have that solution, but we're very cost conscious. We know that we have a budget constraint, and we're trying to operate within that. That's why we kind of recommended the 2 speed cushion rather than the 3 or 4.
But there are some things, but we've actually budgeted for some improvements already. 550. Okay. So there is a budget for improvements in place. And so as we begin to talk, we're conscious of where we are, just so that we're all on the same page. And so I'll take the next person. You got anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll take the next person.
Sure. Pat?
Come on. State your name for the record and your address so we'll have it. And then for Ms. Driggers to fill out speaker card and get it to her before we finish.
I have it right there, thank you. My name is Pat Wilson. I'm a real stakeholder. I live on River Street, 516, which is the middle of it, practically, from one curve to the other curve. That means that I get the people at their maximum speed. 60, 70 miles an hour is not unusual in front of my house. It's been said by several people that we're concerned about reducing the amount of traffic on River Street. That is not a concern for me whatsoever. If we had twice the traffic that we have now, that's fine, as long as they're obeying the speed limit. And I almost was run over the other day myself. I'm an old lady, and I had to get in a hurry to get off the street. So, that would have been bad. I'm very much in favor of a four-way stop at Laurel and 3rd Streets, or Laurel and River. I go through there 4, 5, 6, 8 times a day. That's the way I leave my house, and I go through there. And it is really, I think, of a great benefit to have that, because we have all those boats coming out and going in there. That's the intersection for accessing that. And we've done so many beautiful improvements down on the riverfront that I would like to make that as easy as I can to get all these fishermen that got lots of money to spend in Palatka in there. So I'm very much in favor of that. Secondly, the reflectors in the center of the street, I think that's a very good idea. That will help at least people if they cross the lane, which I've had a trailer with a horse in it come right up in my front yard one day, which was not a very good idea because the guy was going too fast and he lost control and he's up in my yard. Luckily, no one was hurt. So the reflectors would at least let a person know when they have crossed the center line, would be of an assistance to them. And I also would like to see the brick put in the crosswalks. What's been done downtown is excellent. It's very, very effective, I think, in slowing people down. When I go across the brick downtown, I slow down a little bit. And I think that would be a big help without interfering with the roadway in any way. So I'm very much in favor of that. And I'll have to take credit. I was the one who made the motion at the South Historic Neighborhood Association of the 3 items that we have presented. And it was approved by our neighborhood association, and I think that's what was presented here. But I just would like to say we really need it slowed down. Probably on Saturday evenings, starting about 11 till about 3 in the morning. It might as well be a race day out there, especially with the big pickup trucks. And the here we go. Happens again on Friday night, and anytime we have a holiday on Monday, because then we're out celebrating on Sunday night also. So I just would like to see us move to something, and I understand our street is going to be torn up again for a water line in the not too distant future, which would be an optimum time to put the brick in.
Improved.
Improve. Improve. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Who's next? Oh, you got 2 minutes.
3 minutes and 30 seconds. Hi, I'm Bob Griffin at 309 River Street. I'm the guy that lives on the outside of that curve. And I moved to beautiful Palatka to retire. I'm having a great time. I love the city. I knew I lived next door to a public park when I moved in, and it's done nothing but improve. It's a pleasure to be there. My house has been hit twice, as you know. I know that the previous owner, Mr. Moats, was hit at least twice prior to that time. So I'm most concerned about the curve, and I would like for you to think about this as 2 distinct areas of problems. The speed down River Street in Pat's area, and also the curve, not only at my end, but at the other end. I know that in the past, there have been some incidents at the other end of the curve where they've gone off the road and gone into somebody's property there. But in the, right on the curve there, we like a 4-way stop. I don't know what the consultants say about that, but at Laurel and River, the improvements to East Laurel Street and the routing by the playground is tremendous. I walk through there all the time. There's lots and lots of people walking around. Traffic is slow. There's the crosswalks, stop signs, it works. I just think that if people didn't have a running start southbound on River Street, we'd be ahead of the game. On the curb itself, the expanded side area of the bike lane, shrinking the lane, of course, and putting enough RPMs in there so that in the center line and on the sideline, so that when the driver starts to veer out of his lane, they feel and hear a response. It takes more than just a few in there to get that response. I know that there's been an excellent enforcement effort yesterday, and you can see the people coming around the curve. A lot of people can't stay in their lane. It's not a well-designed curve. It's a little sharper than people think it is. So that will help a great deal. The RPMs in the middle will help. I would urge you to do what we can now. Do what's within your purview now. There are a lot of issues that could delay us. So do what you can do first as a city. Second, let's ask the county concurrence on other things. But I don't know how long that process is. I want to see this process advance, so let's do that second. And thirdly, let's see about changing the road designation to a residential road, and so that we would not require county concurrence. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Our resident planner. Ms. Kreider.
Thank you. My name is Linda Kreider, and I reside at 116 Kirkland Street, which is just one house back from River Street. So I get to stand on my porches and watch the speeding traffic and feel bad for my neighbors. But I also am concerned about the street, of course, as a bicyclist, seeing more and more bicycle traffic now coming up River Street. It's a main artery for the cyclists coming into our community as well as people here. The pedestrians using the sidewalk, which is narrow, but that bike lane helps with that separation of traffic. And the fact that Ride Solutions has at least one, I think perhaps more, bus stops along River Street. So the buses are actually stopping. We've got people riding the bus through the town. So I would like to present the concept that I think you'll hear more about, because I'm going to come back toward you asking you and the county to designate a concept for complete streets. This is something that's being done across the nation. A complete street being one that accommodates not only motor vehicles, trucks, but bicyclists, pedestrians, transit users as well. And this could in fact be our first complete street. And if the county also agrees to that policy development, then maybe it's a no-brainer that we develop it in a way that it accommodates that. With that said, I'm going to give you my wish list, which is in concert with the folks you've heard from with the South Historic District, and also working with Jonathan for, I don't know, maybe 8 years now. We did have a previous discussion and proposal with the South Historic District neighborhood, which was, and Pat served on that committee and I chaired it, which was to look at the use of the brick pavers at the intersections as a beautiful way, but also an effective way to calm traffic. So I'd like to reiterate that. We also talked about the bike lanes. When they first went in, the concept was they will give an opportunity to narrow the road width for the motor vehicles and give a place for cyclists. And they've been effective in doing that. They could potentially be more effective by just putting a second stripe and maybe the reflectors in between that then would narrow the road to the 10-foot width Jonathan was talking about. That could be an option. And finally, we also had talked about previously the speed message signs. You've seen probably these some places in communities where there's a message sign that says the speed limit is, and then it flashes, it shows what your speed is as you're approaching it, it flashes that. to let you know you're exceeding the speed limit. Now, it'd be wonderful if there was a camera attached to that that would take the license plate, and the technology is there.
Only in DC.
They're pretty expensive. In my studies, at least, as a traffic transportation planner, I have found that those are between 75 and 85% effective. They're not the ones that come and go away. They're not the ones on the trailer. These would be ones that could be erected on a pole, and they make those with a solar packet so that you don't have to install electricity to them. They're not 100% effective, and I don't know that if there's anything that we do that's going to stop that 5 to 10%. We're just going to speed at will. But I think we want to look for the solutions that are not as costly as some of the things we might do in the future, but that can be effective in slowing the traffic.
Would you be, so in your options, would you be amenable to the 5-foot bike lanes as opposed to 4-foot bike lanes, the wider bike lanes?
Of course I would.
Standard for-
Yeah. And you could even paint the bike lanes if you wanted to. Which I have seen in other communities.
We'll let that be a bike floor project.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Kreider on her recommendations?
Well, that sounds pretty good with the solar radar deal. I had been talking a little bit with Jonathan a while back about the stationary ones should be costing around $7,000 to $10,000 or something along those lines.
They're about 4,000 a sign.
The stationary.
For the radar signs? The radar signs are about 4,000.
Right, and working with Jason on maybe a mobile, Chief Shaw, on something mobile with, working with the county on that, so.
Okay. Ms. Correa, you're not coming up. Oh, you're just moving. Anyone else? Ms. Kitchens, 45 seconds.
You don't want me to summarize it that quick, Mayor.
You'll do it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't
How
want
many pages we got on that notepad?
I live with Kitchens, 1027 South 12th Street. I live 300 feet south of River Street, and I've been traveling River Street for 71 years. First as a baby in my mother's arms, then as in a stroller, then as a toddler on a bicycle, and I worked downtown for 36 years and took a minimum of 6 trips per day up River Street and down River Street. River Street I'm concerned because I understand the way the South Historic District feels, but what they don't seem to understand is River Street is not their little personal private residential street. It is a public road. It belongs to all the citizens of Palatka. It also belongs to all the citizens of Putnam County. River Street is the quickest, fastest, and straightest way to get downtown from the hill area of Palatka, as well as from the Silver Lake Drive, the Hyatt area, the Lundy Road area, and the Pinal area of Putnam County. That is the way that people living there, and we who live in the hill area of Palatka, that's the way we go downtown to city government. That's the way we go to across the river. That's the way we go down to shop. That's the way we go down to eat. And that street is a very important street, and to me it is a health issue. It is a public safety issue. And the public safety issue is this. We had 3 evacuation routes in the city of Palatka. River Street was one of them. Somebody got that designation removed, and I will find out who. That needs to be reinstated as an evacuation route. It's extremely important. I'm not about to go up the hill all the way to Mosley and go all the way over to Reed Street if I have to evacuate and head to East Palatka. I'm going down River Street. And I think it's very, very important to keep River Street or reinstate River Street as a main evacuation route. We only have 3 of them. The other thing is we have 4 main roads in Palatka that carry a lot of traffic and always have historically. We have Hudson Avenue, we have Mosley, we have St. John's, and we have River Street. The other 3 streets have to have a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit on them, and they have way more houses than River Street does. River Street was 35. There were some problems when the speed was 35 miles per hour. I heard there were problems. I didn't see any, but I did hear there were problems, and I believed it. When they dropped the speed limit to 25, that's when people were speeding because they were still going 35 and 40 on the 25-mile-an-hour street. Now, I believe that the citizens have seen some people going 70 miles an hour. I personally cannot determine when I see a car whether it's going 50 or 70 if I'm on the street looking. That's not the point. As for the wrecks on the curves, you can slow that traffic down to zero almost, and those wrecks occur for one reason and one reason only, or maybe two. The first reason is, and I think it was Miss Wilson said that it was on Friday and Saturday night between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. That's when the bars turn out, that's when the people that are drunk come up the street. The curve up by the railroad track, which is on the block opposite of where I live, that has been hit by drunk drivers coming from the downtown bars at night. Drinking is a problem. I could take those curves, I haven't taken those curves, but I could take those curves if I wasn't texting, which I don't do. The other thing could be when the person with the horse trailer ran up on the property, maybe they were texting. If you're in your right mind and you're watching the road, there's no way you're going to run out of your lane. I could take those curves going way faster and not have one bit of a problem. I can guarantee you that.
You ever wrote Miss Brown?
I have.
I know you did.
I have, but I can tell you that I could take any of those curves way faster and I would not run into the other lane. As far as accelerating from 3rd Street to the curve, that's kind of hard to do. I can accelerate from 0 to 65 in 17 seconds with my car, but I have to get, and I've tested it, I have to get a running start. And from 3rd Street, where 3rd hits Laurel, where Laurel hits River Street, I don't think you can get enough speed up to cause a problem at that curve. And I understand that I know there was a couple of people hit the fence there when Miss Moats had the property, and I think there's been a couple of more wrecks. That's not a bad record for in 70 plus years, but River Street is a main street. And the reason that the county is involved is it is a county road because the county citizens have used it. It's been a main road since 1884 and probably since the 1860s. If you look at the 1884 Bird's map of Palatka, go back to Bird's map of 1853, 1829, which was re-recorded in 1853, you'll probably see that it was a main street then. The county, probably 50 years ago, when Harry Brown was the commissioner, and I don't even know who the mayor was then, I have no idea. That is when the county partnered with the city to maintain River Street because the county citizens used River Street and the city thought it was a good idea for the county to help them pave it and maintain it, and that's what happened with that. But this is a main street, it's not a private little residential street, it never has been. And I as a citizen of Palatka, and a taxpayer, and a Putnam County taxpayer, I don't want to see the traffic, I want to slow to 70 miles an hour, that's too fast, good Lord. Nobody needs to go that fast. But, I mean, it should be, first of all, it should be reinstated as an evacuation route, raise the speed limit to 35, and if people are doing 70, yes, they need to be stopped and they need to be arrested. If the South Historic District has the money and they want to put up one of those radar things showing how fast you're going, great. I personally always know how fast I'm going because I look at my speedometer. But seriously, this is a street that you don't need to impede the traffic. And let me give you some back history that some of you all know, Ms. Brown knows it. It was probably around 12 years ago when they put a four-way stop at Laurel and 3rd Street. There was almost 5 or 6 serious accidents there. That's a horrible thing. If you're going to put anything there, and I'm not for it, but put a red light there. Four-way stops are hideous. Mr. Campbell almost got hit at the four-way stop that's now at Mosley and St. John's. You got four people coming, you got trucks coming, they don't know which way to go.
So you saw him drive?
No. I haven't actually. But if you're going to put anything there, and I would be against that, but from the money standpoint, but put a red light at Laurel and River Street. Do not put that stupid four-way stop. And don't do anything to reduce the traffic on River Street. Speed, yeah, that could be a problem. I haven't seen people speeding like that. I get up to 40 when I go past Florida Furniture if there's no police there just to see. And when I get to that, they know that. They see me slam on brakes when I see them. But when I get to Morris Street, where there's houses and residential, I slow down. And I live just off River Street. I think it's ridiculous to think that this is we want to make this a little private road for a small group of people, and this is a big road that belongs to the entire county. So there was bad repercussions the last time. Poor Miss Leary. Her yard was torn up, and if you do this, you're going to have some serious problems with the county residents. I promise you that. Thank you.
Over 10 is a major speed, I think.
Blair.
Pardon?
Over 10 is a major speed.
Well, and that's over 10.
Have you ever rode with a labor?
No, one time, no, never.
Hey, I just live across the street from it, still coming down that little road, 50 miles per
My
hour.
name is Susan Blair, and my name is Susan Blair. I live at 140 Height Road. I live in the county, just off Silver Lake Drive. River Street's one of my main ways through.
has been for 45 years. I'd like to know how many tickets they've written out there for people doing 70 miles an hour. Anybody have an idea? None? I figured 45 and above, they're writing tickets, but I can't imagine them doing 70. It may feel like it to somebody. But what I'm sitting here listening, because I wanted to hear everybody's point of view, that's why I kept sitting and waiting. I hear the South Historical District, I understand their needs and their wants, but I hear them trying to make this into a small grouped road and to cut down as much through traffic as possible. I know that when Miss Larry had the stop sign, there were a lot of horn honking, a lot of other stuff. But luckily that in the fall, during hunting season, and yes, I hunt, we go through there in the mornings about 5 with dogs in a dog box. You know how bad they're going to bark every time you hit a speed bump? And trust me, there are a lot of people and a lot of trucks with a lot of animals in them. And I'm like Allegra, if they hit her horse, they ended up with a horse trailer in her yard. There was a problem. I pulled a horse trailer. And you can't take those curves that fast. You have to slow down. I don't know, like she said, maybe texting it, a lot of things. But I just hear them trying to say, it makes it sound like, and I get the fact that they're not talking about traffic numbers, because that's what I originally thought when I read the paper, and like the number of traffic people on the road. So I started making a point. I was going to work that way. Me, myself, and that was it. I sat down there one day during rush hour traffic, 5 o'clock, I counted all the 20 cars on it. So I'm thinking, where are the numbers that people are telling me about? Where is it not safe to walk my dog at 6 in the morning? I don't see it. I'm not a fast driver, and I admit it. I probably was at 20, but I'm not at 66. And I don't think I know that when I live on a road that is like a freeway also, and it's a dead-end road, and it's in the county. I hear the trucks on the weekends. I hear the motorcycles come winding up. And a lot of times, they don't make that curve on High Road. They end up in somebody's yard. They've ended up in my yard a couple of times. But that's got to go back to enforcement, and I know they can't be there all the time. I don't have a problem with the I don't know, we call them bumps, just, the little side of the road bumps, the reflectors. I don't see where that hurts. But when you start talking about all these other bumps, I'm afraid what's going to happen, you're going to get horns honked every time they hit one. Every time they hit one, they're going to honk a horn at you. And I don't know how to tell you to make them quit doing it. And I'm talking about kids from 16 to 80 that are going to do it. So I just really want you, before you try to take this out of the county hands and make this a South Historical Residential Road, which is what they make it sound like, to really stop and think about that. Because I'm telling you, for 45, that's the way I go to St. Augustine. I go to work some days that way. I go to church that way. And I have a group at church that can tell you they get a ticket at 35 because they were late for church one morning. And a couple of them got stopped. So the guys are out there doing their best when they're on the street. They can't be there 24/7. I know that. Y'all know that. But let's just use a little more common sense with some of this. And yeah, I got upset when I heard, we don't want traffic on it. Well, that's because that's what I led to believe when I read the paper. It was about numbers. And that's not the thing. That's not what I'm hearing today. It's not about the numbers. It's about the speed limit. And I would be just interested to see what the, top speed in the last month anybody's written a ticket on that road for. 45, 50, 55, 60. Because nobody had business driving that fast on that road. And yes, I've ridden with the Libra one time and one time only. Won't do that again. But just stop and think about everybody involved in it, not just the South Historical District. That's all I ask. Just think about everybody.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm
Stand up for
really
me.
having a problem.
Give your name for the record.
I guess, I haven't heard anybody in the South Historic District say, we want this street to just be in our neighborhood.
I haven't heard anybody say, we want the traffic numbers cut down. So we keep coming back to this, that we are a group of people down there who are so stuck on ourselves that we think we own the street. We don't think we own the street, as far as I'm concerned, as far as anybody that lives on River Street that I've ever talked to. And I've been there just about as long as anybody except Miss Sandy sitting there. We're just asking that the traffic, that the laws that are in place presently be obeyed. Now, whatever means it takes to get them obeyed.
Okay.
And not that we want you to not come down River Street. We love you to come down River Street. We work hard on our yards to make them look nice.
It's the prettiest drive in the county. And there's no doubt about it. It is the prettiest drive in the county. And most of us go slow enough to enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Two bites of the apple? You got 30 seconds on your second bite.
Thank you for answering Ms. Wilson's question. In your agenda packet, if you read it, there is a note under the staff report, or else under the South Historic District minutes. It says when it's requesting, it says it's a county collector road, but it's used as an arterial road by out-of-city residents. And I think that's why people think that they have something against out-of-city residents. It's in your agenda packet. Page 6.
You read it before?
I did.
I did too.
Mr. Mayor, just a real quick comment. Basically, because of the stormwater sewer project that's currently going on the south side, basically they shut it down. They shut down River Street. River Street was shut down for 2 or maybe 3 weeks. And as far as I know, there wasn't any calling from complaints on that. So that kind of gives you an indicative that people will move to alternative routes.
Hold on, before we get to point, counterpoint, let me just go through anyone else that wants to speak. Nobody else in it, last counterpoint. For the record, Ms. Blair.
I probably used the words my mama would have washed my mouth out for. Every time I came down River Street and it was still closed, and I had to cut up and go, and you start zigzagging through the whole neighborhood trying to get around it. But we knew it was a matter of time that it would be open again, so why call and raise you know what about it? Because it was work in progress, and we knew that. But it didn't make it any easier, and I feel sorry for the people at the cabinet company, because they got all the traffic, and then you had to turn again down by the cemetery and hit Krill and go out, because you couldn't go through because of the pipes. So yeah, there were a lot of us that were complaining about it. We just weren't going to the city. We were waiting for it to get finished.
Okay.
I want to know what Sandy got to say.
Where, Miss Sandy?
I want to know what Sandy got to say.
What took you so long? You're trying to wait to be last, huh? You've earned that, right? Go ahead.
Sandy Bird, 510 River Street. I've lived in my home for over 40 years, and I would just like to make one comment on the speed bumps. I really don't know of a resident in here that would want a speed bump in front of their home. There are several cuts in the road because of utility problems, because of inferior pipes put in years ago. And so there are several bumps already there.
They're unofficial speed
Two right in
bumps.
front of my house recently. And in the middle of the night, or at 5 o'clock in the morning, when a truck and trailer is going by, and it hits those bumps, it can wake you up if you're not sleeping very soundly. Okay. So I think that that's something to consider. If anyone in here is willing to want these speed bump one in front of their home, raise your hand. Okay. Gotcha. Anyway, maybe, hopefully there will be another alternative. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Crider, you already missed the second chance portion. No, go ahead. We're going to wrap this thing up in a couple minutes and have some dialogue with the commission for a second.
I just wanted to point out that the city actually owns Hotel Street, Kirkland Street, Forest Street, all those streets that come down and end up in the river. And so those are the intersections where we were talking about actually putting something there that would be a slowing device. It wouldn't be in front of people's houses. So I think there's the potential in the future to even do other things with those intersections there and the river that the city has access to.
But those intersections are next to people's houses. That's why Miss Leary knows her son came and ate us up before he got on the commission here, because it was disturbing his mother's rest, because they had put, I think, a stop sign.
Right by.
Yeah, a stop sign in. It was too
Well,
distracting to
and
her.
maybe people weren't used to it, so all of a sudden they're coming up on it. But the four-way stop at Laurel makes a lot of sense. It's already a three-way stop. You know, and the idea of all that boat traffic coming out, people are needing to slow down. So that's kind of a no-brainer in my book. But, you know, I think when you've had, we put $6,000 up, the South Historic Neighborhood Association, several years ago to add to the traffic study that was done and to actually take a look at River Street. So I think, you know, they came up with a number of different alternatives, some of which we liked, some of which we didn't. But I think between that and your staff recommendations, you've got, you know, the information to make a good decision, and factoring in the cost element of things, you know, what's going to be the biggest bang for the smallest buck is an avenue to go with, and it's not like it's a done deal forever, too. I mean, you can go back and revisit things again. So, thank you.
Mr. B, stay right there.
Okay, thank you. Larry Beaton, 607 South Moody Road, property owner in the South Historic District on Cole Avenue. I wasn't going to say anything to begin with, but a couple of the comments, I would hope that the commission would reflect on the aesthetic value of that neighborhood. One of the reasons that some people drive down River Street is to look at the beauty of the river and the beauty of the homes there. And I would hope that the city would shy away from flashing lights and things that really kind of distract from the beauty of driving down River Street. Speed is definitely a problem on the street. I have driven the street numerous times over the years, driving the speed limit, and had people pass me. And so, you know, it is a problem for people living on that street, but I just hope that the solution is one that is aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood, because it's such a beautiful area, and it's a historic area, and I would hate to see electronic devices and all be part of the solution when there's other solutions that you could use brick and other devices that would accomplish what you need to try to do to improve the safety of the area.
Thank you. Any comments from the commission before anyone else besides the second and third comment, folks? Seeing that we've exhausted all our conversation from the floor, any comments from the commission, having heard all of the commentary thus far?
I want to say, I said I was going to listen, because I've been sitting here and I've heard both sides for not just this year, but for several years when the problem has been there. I just want to plant a seed, not either way. But we've got to remember that Palatka is finally growing. And there are going to be adjustments that we have to make over a period of years. And I'm like Mr. Beaton, you want to make us look as attractive and as beautiful as we can, as we solve our problems. And I hope that you all will be patient and we work things out so that people are safe, because safety is first. But I also want you to remember, if they ever develop Cypress Mills, is that what he's calling it?
Wilson Cypress.
The Wilson Cypress Mills, there used to be tons of trucks and logs and everything else going in and out of that area. And if he happens to develop the properties up there and puts nice condos, which we're trying to get people to live in, traffic is going to pick up. If we do stuff to slow speed down before they get here, it'll be wonderful. But just remember, where I live on the corner of 9th and St. John's, and people hit that bump. And after a while, I don't hear them anymore. But we can't slow them, we can't stop them from traveling, because they're trying to especially make that lighter on St. John's Avenue. And they've hit some buildings on both sides of the street. It's got to be where we think about where we want to go with this town and what we want to do. So that's what I think.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle?
Well, I just think that we really need to hear from the people who's affected. I think they're not making some of these things up. I don't agree totally with the speed by them not having being trained with speed guns or anything of that nature, but that we leave that up to our law enforcement to be able to kind of capture speed with those devices. Again, they have monitored the area for some period of time, and they say they have dealt with the people who were violating those speeds. I do know there's something that needs to be done as it relates to Mr. Griffin. He's had this wall imploded a couple times, and there are some other things that's happened. I've sat out there for a while, right there with Mr. Freeman for a few times, just listening and looking. But I do think there is some concern, and we need to do what we can do to improve the public health and safety of the citizens. They're making the complaints. We're going to investigate it as best we can. We're going to work with our law enforcement to put various things in it to capture the traffic light. Miss, what's your last name? Yes, we want to put something in there to at least capture stats, information, so we can make a better informed decision. We can't just do it based off of how we feel or what we think, but we want to do it and do it in the best approach. So.
What do you suggest to put there to capture the statistics?
Sir?
What are you suggesting to put in place to capture statistics?
I do know that they have those speed signs, I think, that captures information as it relates to speed, and they can collect from is that not true what they use for the sheriff office? Use those speed mobile speed devices that captures the speed information of what have you. Jonathan, don't they have those?
It's those strips that go across the highway and connect to the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are currently out right now. The county's doing data collection. There's one at the corner of Oak and Third currently.
Right, you can do the speed count.
It doesn't do speed.
Well, not speed.
Does
Count, and as well, but you got those other devices, the mobile devices that show your speed, what the posted speed is and what your current speed is, and doesn't it collect information?
Does it collect data?
I have not seen one that collects.
I don't think it collects the data.
Okay.
They do collect data if you want to spend the money to get it. It'd be more expensive.
Well, I know we was at a conference. We was at a conference, and I know that they had those particular things in place, and that's why. If you don't buy that option, then yeah, you wonder you're not going to collect.
How much are those?
I don't know the cost offhand, but here's a picture of one that Mr. Rufus Gorham's speaking of.
I know what it looks like. It looks like the same one. I just look at it. Maybe what's the very expensive portion? I want to know.
This is part of the traffic study.
They all look the same.
Man, you know, we sitting here talking, but if we want to enhance the beauty of down there, we've done it with the downtown. Going the rich streets and reflectors and widening the bicycle lanes might be a start for us. It would not take away from the beauty of the area, because I take people on tours and I make sure I go to my historic districts, and I want it to look like when they get out my car that they'll want to come back here and buy a piece of property. And if we did things that would, those brick streets, if we still have some of our old brick around, that might be the thing that might enhance us to make it look better. And then we got to talk to our neighbors and other people in the town. Maybe the newspaper will be good enough to write an article and talk about how we making it better. And if we're looking at traffic and if people are driving too fast. Because sometimes people not aware, you get in these cars, roll your windows up, and they ride easy. Boy, you look up and you're going a little faster than you thought. So maybe if would look at that, it would not bother the people who have to still want to come through and look beautiful. And it would enhance the area that we have and help take care of the speed.
Okay. We're We're gonna try to move this along. Captain?
I just want to add to that.
Captain
Currently, what we do is Captain Williams Black Police Department. What we currently do now is we've been using our officers to actually capture that data for us by having them sit there and use laser and use radar to just get an average of what the speed is. So some of the days you'll see officers just sitting there and they're like, why are they not stopping cars? Because what we want to try to do first of all is see how bad is it? What's the average of the speed of the cars coming? So to save time, one of those devices would be absolutely perfect to have something like that in order to set it up, see if it can capture the speed for us, get that data. But currently, what we do now is use our officers to catch that data for us. And I'll also have to say too, as far as cars doing 60 miles an hour, 70, we are out there looking at it, and we haven't seen any doing 60 or 70. I will say this: vehicles over time have gotten bigger. And visually, a big vehicle traveling, say above 25, 26, 27, they do look like they're moving at a pretty good speed. But 60 and 70, they aren't doing that. I think the
I tried to explain that to a cop one night.
Chief's gonna ask for one of those machines in the budget this year.
Yeah, and I kind of read the study that they provided online here, and I think the highest rate of speed that they observed that day when they were doing the traffic study was 51 miles per hour. And I think the average speed, both eastward and eastbound and westbound, was 37 miles per hour. I really don't have much to say. One of the things that I am impressed with, and I do want to keep in mind that safety comes first. Working in the field of education, we always think the academics come first, but I always say safety first, learning comes second. I know we're talking about aesthetics here, but we're also talking about safety when we're talking about River Street and traveling that street. But one of the things that I'm impressed with and think that it's, seeing that it's low cost and low to high maintenance is the striping improvements. I think that'll be a major, a great start and a great improvement for us to go ahead and try to move forward with this process.
Thank you.
More than I've ever said.
Yeah, and you travel that street.
Outside of the prayer.
I guess I'm being put in a position to say something. I'm one that actually listens, gather my thoughts, even though it's one of those things where you hear bits and pieces, but to finally bring everyone together, I think this is beneficial to me. As Commissioner McCaskill stated, our safety is our first priority. And I think, I can't remember who said it, but getting the best results for the cheapest, we're in that. I like that slogan motto too. But at the end of the day, I've gotten a lot of information that I need to take into consideration. And we can go from here. But I think this step was bringing everyone together to hear the various sides. Is putting us in the right direction, and we can kind of go forth from there.
I guess just to wrap things up, it seems like there were a lot of things that were said that were in keeping with the recommendations that came from the traffic calming study, particularly the intermediate portions of the intermediate options, where we look at striping, where we look at textured crosswalks and things of that nature as a mechanism to put in place. I think the conversation today, it seems as though we're all saying the same thing in various ways. The low-hanging fruit is striping. The low-hanging fruit is anything that puts us in a position where we can delineate from what we've got in place from before. The four-way stop is probably the biggest. The four-way stop and the speed humps are the biggest things that we have where there is some disagreement as to where we are, coupled with the lighted radar signs. Those are the three things that overall there was some disagreement, if very little. But the overall thing that we all seem to agree on is putting in striping, the bicycle lanes, and other mechanisms that will put us where we need to be. There's no level of enforcement that you can put out there besides 24-hour enforcement that's ever going to stop folks from speeding on that street. And I think that Chief, along with his officers, have done an excellent job in trying to enforce as much as possible on the roadway to try to be considerate of the complaints. But there's absolutely no way that they can deal with it all. There is absolutely no way that they're going to be there to assure you that some driver doesn't veer off of the roadway. Carelessness is something that none of us can prevent on an overall basis unless we raise consciousness. And we can't foresee what some folks are going to do on the roadway. I think that what we can do is put in the proper mechanisms in keeping with what's going on in the community from an aesthetic standpoint, but also in keeping with what the professionals have given us as recommendations. Those things are low-hanging fruit, well within the budget that we've put in place for River Street. And I think it gives Mr. Griffith excellent information to go back with. Unfortunately, it's stuff that we were already talking about putting in place. But I think workshops such as this are good because it gives the people a voice. Your voice has been heard. Your recommendations have been heard. It does not go on deaf ears. And I think ultimately, if you listen to the commission's comments, they've all heard it. They're all responsive to it. And there will be some solutions and something will be in place. Jonathan, I think that we talk about next steps, and that's really where we are. Our next steps from here, I think, is just to really put something together to bring it before both the CRA and the commission, but also to run it by, I think, South Historic as well, so that we hit the low-hanging fruit first to test those mechanisms, to see if, in fact, they address most of our concerns. If those concerns aren't addressed at that point, then we go to the next phase. And I think that we can do that pretty simply as we continue on with the improvements with our potable water as well. And so I'll continually say that the byproduct of increased infrastructure is streetscape. And so streetscape in this situation may also be the answer to reducing some of the opportunities for folks to violate conditions that are set forth. And it may eliminate some of the phone calls that we get. But at the end of the day, it's going to take its patience. This stuff didn't happen over time. The speed limit's been changed on that road a couple times. The four-way stop's been moved a couple times. And so it's a process. And so let's attack the low-hanging fruit first, being conscious of the safety aspects, and then move forward. Anything from you in closing? Good. Are we okay with that? Any heartburn going on in this room at this point? I think we're on the same page, guys. I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate the fact that we finished 5 minutes before the time I anticipated us finishing. And so we've got a commission meeting back at 6, but I want to thank each and every one of you, one, for coming out and letting us hear you, because we can't make decisions from an educated standpoint unless we hear the voice of the people. And so workshops are always good because we can hear. And after the workshop is when the real work starts to take place. And so again, make sure that you're in constant dialogue with staff and with the city manager as we move forward. For those of you who have not met Mr. Folston, this is our new city manager, Zariah Folston. And so he gets an opportunity to see that we will workshop in an effort to make sure that we find solutions. Bessie has gabbled me down, so.
Yo, give everybody else 2 minutes.